Okay. Hi, everybody. Chris Ying here. Today, I'm going to deliver something of a State of the Union on the podcast I co founded with David Chang and usually host called Recipe Club. I have some notes in front of me, but I'm going to just try to talk at you a little extemporaneously today about the state of the show, but also maybe more generally just the state of myself and people like me who try to make creative things. And yeah, so this is the fourth season of Recipe Club, a podcast that we started during the pandemic. And we took a break this season after our 20th episode. And I'll tell you straight up that the season was not supposed to be 20 episodes long. The season was supposed to be 29 episodes. And we stopped short for a bunch of reasons, which I'm going to get into today. But before we get any deeper into what this podcast is going to be or where it's headed, I just wanted to talk directly to you as listeners or people who used to listen or people who work on the podcast with me or anybody who's just searching the internet for um, you know, podcaster having a meltdown in front of the entire world. That's not what's really happening here, but close. So we stopped the podcast after 20 episodes this season because I don't know, was it bad? I think there were very good moments of this show. There are moments of this season that I've been going back and listening to just to make me laugh, and I listen to them on repeat. There were smart moments and revelations and people that I got to talk to this season that were great, but were less people listening than I wanted to listen. Sure. Do I have all sorts of excuses for why that might be the case? Yeah, obviously. Does any of that matter? And does it ultimately sort of just fall onto my shoulders if I was making a show that was not entirely what it could be? Yeah, that's on me. So what I want to talk about today is not the past. I mean, yes, the past. A lot about the past. I'm going to talk a lot about the past, but I I want to talk about where we can go and what I'm hopeful for. And is this, what I want to be doing? Do I want to be sort of dissecting the creative process and dissecting, doing a postmortem on a season that's still half alive? No, but it's the right thing for me to do. Like this bowl of oatmeal that I've sort of been eating, and I hate it, but I know that it's ultimately the right and good thing to do. Oh my god, plain oatmeal is awful. Um, and maybe, hopefully, this one-way conversation I'm going to have with you might be relatable to anyone who's tried to do something creative over the years and gotten stuck. And I hate getting stuck. And I don't necessarily mean stuck in the writer's block sense, in the shortage of ideas sense. I sort of just mean you start going down the road, you get excited about an idea, you start doing it, maybe it gets some response, and then it hits a plateau. And sometimes it hits a plateau because the idea was never as good as you thought it was, or it hit a plateau because you didn't push it forward enough. You didn't change it or iterate it or stay true to the core of it. Your eyes got bigger than your stomach, or whatever the right phrase here would be, where you just started thinking about everything else it could be and where it might lead, as opposed to building this thing. And I've gotten stuck so many times over the years. And usually you just kind of move on. You say, "Okay, I got stuck. Well, that was cool. We tried it. Let's do something else." And you move on. But, you know, when you push into your 40s like I have, you start to worry existentially about those stuck times where are you stuck because you've lost your touch, or you never had a touch to begin with, or your window is closed, and none of this is a huge revelation. This is getting older, right? This is just what it means to not be 22 and sort of uh beautifully naive, and yeah. But the position I find myself in, and I found myself in for a long time, even before I was, where I am right now, is this position of getting stuck because I'm a terrible gambler. Let me put it that way. I'm not a terrible gambler in the sense that I have a gambling problem. I'm a terrible gambler in the sense that I like to spread my chips out, make lots of small or medium sized bets all over the roulette table, which I know is a dumb place to gamble to begin with. But that is the dumbest betting strategy, right? Betting to break even is a losing strategy, and that's one of the ways in which I think a lot of us get stuck, or at least I do, and people like me who are surrounded by people like Dave Chang, who like to make big bets on one thing and go all in on something. And the risk versus reward ratio is extremely high. And that's how you win big, that's how you lose big. And I think the fear of losing big, I mean, it's funny because last time I went gambling with Dave, I had an in person lesson in a casino about my betting failures. And we don't have to talk about that right now, but suffice to say, Dave was essentially not talking metaphorically in this moment, but literally was like, "What are you doing? You have to bet to win." So, anyway, um, I like to spread my chips, and it used to drive me crazy because this is how when I was a kid, this is how my dad used to gamble in all things in life, in the stock market and literal casinos, just in life. He's a very careful person, and it drove me crazy that he couldn't, bet big on something, because I was always attracted to the big bet and going all in on something. And as I get older, I just find myself more and more and more trending toward this middle line of like, do a lot of small things, a lot of big ideas, but put a little bit of money and time and resource and effort into a lot of big ideas, as opposed to putting everything you can into one. And yeah, I mean, maybe let me give you a little bit more background on myself and how we got here. So in college, I came into college as a biology major and a computer science major because I was good at that stuff. I was good at math and science, and that's what the track in life had me moving toward. That's what my parents wanted me to do, so I came in with those intentions. And sophomore year, I think two things happened that essentially have shaped my entire career and life since then. One was I sent an email to my dad saying, "I'm really sorry. I know this might be disappointing. I don't think I can pursue science or computer science or biology or whatever it was. I think I'm going to study English literature." Um, and I I just was I just was better at it. And I cared about it, and I liked it, and I liked reading, and I liked writing. And when I closed my eyes, I imagined myself as a writer. I also imagine myself as a firefighter, which is neither here nor there. Um, and the other thing I did, and I mean that doesn't sound momentous to a lot of people, but I mean I imagine a certain sect of you who grew up like I did, or look like I do, or essentially grew up as an Asian kid, might be able to relate to what it's like to send an email to your parents being like, "Hey, I'm not going to do what you asked me to do. I'm going to do something the opposite." So, anyway, along the same lines, the other thing I started doing was I started cooking in restaurants. Um, I walked into a restaurant, the fanciest restaurant I could find in Berkeley, not Chez Panisse, but a restaurant that was started by some alums from Chez Panisse, and I asked for a job. I had been watching a lot of Food Network. I'd cooked at home a few times, and I don't know, I just something about it was it drew me to this work that was completely different than anything I'd ever done in my life. This kind of manual labor, and the chef, a guy named David Stevenson, the first of many Davids uh, that have come into my life. He looked at me kind of sideways. He kind of smirked at me, and then beckoned for me to follow him into the restaurant. We walked up to the pass, and his one of his sous chefs, a woman named Kit, who was total badass, but incredibly kind and generous and thoughtful person. Which I would find out later. I didn't know her at this moment. He said to Kit, uh, Kit, do we need any more people in the kitchen who don't know anything about anything? And to which she looks up and she says, "No, I think we're good on that." And so I thought that was the end of the conversation. I thought he was just sort of humiliating me, but he for whatever reason took a liking to me, let me work in the kitchen, put me on the line basically right away, and then for the next 4 or 5 years, I cooked and went to school, and then graduated and kept cooking and working. I cooked in the kitchen. I waited tables. I designed posters for the restaurants. And after I left that restaurant and moved to San Francisco, I started a couple of restaurants or helped some friends start some restaurants that went on to be hugely successful. But I eventually I quit. I stopped cooking because I wanted to focus on my day job. I would work at a publishing company called McSweeney's in as an intern in the mornings, and then I would go work a night shift at the restaurant. And eventually, I stopped because I was like, I'm going to focus on my serious day job. Uh, and I never gave a second thought to being a cook because I don't listen. I don't believe that I would have eventually grown into some kind of world class chef. I don't think that's true. I was never the fastest in the kitchen. I was never a particularly exceptional cook. I was pretty bad, all things considered. I mean, I'm better than a civilian, but uh, I guess more importantly, I never even thought about it as an option. I never thought for a second, hey, even when I was eventually, putting out some menus or doing some themed nights of my own and sort of taking the reins of the kitchen, I never thought of myself as potentially being a chef. And that's been a flaw of mine for a long time, which is to not really recognize the opportunity or potential in front of me. And maybe I'm just sort of spoiled because I get these opportunities tend to come to me. And it's a double-edged sword. I think on the one hand, if you're never really aware of the magnitude of a situation, if you're sort of just oblivious like I can be, then you don't, or you're not as susceptible to fear. If you're not aware of a situation and how big it is or what the potential is or any of that, then you don't feel nervous to get on stage or uh, host a podcast or whatever the task may be. But by the same token, if you're not aware of the opportunity, you just end up missing it. Um, and that's been a problem for me. It's not that I don't chase things. I chase things all the time. So after I stopped working at restaurants, I started working at McSweeney's for the author Dave Eggers, who had founded this small independent publishing company in the Mission district of San Francisco, with the intent of, he it's so funny. Dave Eggers is exactly like Dave Chang, and Dave Eggers is the second Dave of my life. But he's just somebody who had seen for not that long of a time, but a decent amount of time, what it was like in the world of publishing, and he just had rejected it, and he wanted to do something different. He wanted to do it with young people who were excited, who would work for cheap, um, to build something else outside of the system that he had found his own success in and had learned in, but he wanted to make something new. So I went all in. I drank the Kool-Aid. But uh yeah, I mean, just to go back for a second, thinking about this, what we're talking about, that leaving kitchens to go to McSweeney's was maybe the first big time I had gotten stuck and then moved on. Um I put 4 or 5 years of my life into cooking, but not wholeheartedly. And I was pretty good at it, and I could have been a lot better at it, but I never really explored it. And that's what I'm talking about when I mean getting stuck. You it doesn't feel like you've hit a wall. It doesn't feel like you're trapped in mud. It just feels like, well, that didn't work, and now I'm stuck. So let me go down a different path. Um, so at McSweeney's, my kind of like kitchen mentality took me a long way, and this is something for anybody who's trying to get started in all of this. And I work with a lot of young people, um, who I think don't recognize this unlock. And this is just for me personally. Again, I don't know this necessarily works for everybody, but the kitchen mentality, just sort of raise your hand and say I can do that, regardless of what the task is. Um, I was an intern at McSweeney's. Our tasks were just sort of like read the submissions in the slush pile, um, reorganize the shelves, whatever the case may be. But every now and then, Dave Eggers would walk in and he'd have a hot new idea in his mind. And I remember one of them was to to start an oral history series documenting human rights crises around the world. And he was like, "Is anybody a big fan of oral history? Does anybody read Studs Terkel and want to work on this?" And my hand shot up. I had no idea who Studs Terkel was. I had never even read an oral history. I don't. To be honest with you, I don't know if I've ever finished a Studs Terkel book to this day, but I ended up editing a series of books documenting human rights crises, and I ended up designing DVDs because, when somebody said, "Does anybody know how to use," at the time it was PageMaker, the predecessor to all the Adobe apps we have today, I raised my hand, or it was Quark. It was called Quark. I raised my hand and said, "Yeah, I can do that." And then went home, and I don't remember, there was no YouTube at the time. I checked out a book maybe and learned how to do it, and I did it. Anyway, that got me pretty far at McSweeney's, where I eventually became, I was an intern, then I was sort of an editor, and then eventually I became the publisher of this company. But McSweeney's was this place where uh, we got stuck a lot. We made a lot of really, really special things, a lot of special books and magazines and projects. We made a newspaper. The way I met Dave Chang was this newspaper we made that was like a 400-page newspaper at a time when everybody was saying that print media was dying. We made this newspaper and it got some attention. But once we finished it and we finished that project, we just moved on to the next thing. And I look back and I think about this small team we had, and just, it was the exact same environment I find myself in today. And I wonder if other people are in, where it's just like, there's no shortage of ideas. There's no shortage of motivation, of brain power, of creative juices. But you just want to do everything. you want to start a magazine, a quarterly fiction, a fiction quarterly, a these oral histories and a poetry series and kids books and a DVD series and novel after novel after novel, and like, oh, what if we did this or that or the other thing, and it was all very cool and smart and unique. And I look back and I just think, man, if we had just all committed to one thing, I know that something would have blown up. It's some extremely corrosive form of YOLO, right? Where you think, if I don't indulge this idea, like, it hurts. It hurts to not do all of these things. And what happens is, you look around, you say, I have 100 incredible ideas and none of them are coming to fruition. What the hell is going on here? And I have so much. And when I worked at McSweeney's, it was a wonderful, terrible time. We, as like, kids in our 20s, just trying to make something, and sort of having come in thinking, um man, we can succeed on our own terms. We can succeed doing crazy, weird, interesting stuff, and none of it ever popping, and us not getting paid very much, and not really understanding why Dave would be frustrated. It was terrible. um but I look back on it, and then I understand a lot more of what he was trying to do. And only recently, and maybe like literally the last couple of weeks, today, I'm like really understanding why, and why it's plaguing me. But anyway, so at McSweeney's is where we started a magazine called Lucky Peach. I met Dave Chang, Dave number three, uh, and we hit it off because, spoiler alert, Dave, as much as he is the catalyst for what I'm talking about today, as much as he is the one who's calling me out on this tendency, he has the same disease too. Like, we love ideas. We love to talk over ideas with smart people. We love to get excited about ideas. And that's where we kicked it off. I met Dave in New York one day. We had a long lunch. We had never met, and we just excitedly talked about everything we thought, food media could be. And Dave was the first person I'd ever talked to from the restaurant world who I could talk to in the same way I talk to people at McSweeney's about publishing and art and writing and craft and all of these things. And so we started this magazine called Lucky Peach that basically lived in the exact center of what I'm talking about. If the Venn diagram is super, super deep food knowledge and uh writing and art and music and all other parts of culture, this magazine we endeavored to start lived in the exact middle ground between these two things. This space that was, how can food help us talk about the other side, and how can the other side help us talk about food? And um, it was a huge success. Lucky Peach was a huge, huge success. I don't just mean in terms um, of its legacy and effect and the way it sort of changed media, which I think a lot of people know. But like, it was a huge success in like the very first issue. We sold out our first printing. We sold out our second printing. We sold more copies of this thing that we had ever sold of anything at McSweeney's before. And suddenly I escaped being stuck at McSweeney's again by going to Lucky Peach, and wouldn't you know it, I got stuck at Lucky Peach again. Um, there's a lot of different reasons why the magazine stopped. Um, but this thing that I was like, this is it. This is the one that's going to pop. This is the exact, this is the collision point between like what I'm interested in personally, what I'm good at, and where my expertise is this thing. And there are lots of reasons why we stopped, but we got stuck, we plateaued, we hit a place where it was not going to grow. And that was when that's when Dave, Chang, and I, after maybe I guess 4 or 5 years, we broke up. And I characterize it like that because that's probably really the sort of most accurate way to describe what happened. Um, you know, we just had kind of an ugly falling out because of getting stuck, really. And a year and a half went by where we kind of went our separate ways. I did some other different things. We both kind of had different revelations, and then we got back together to form Major Domo Media. And the idea with Major Domo Media was we weren't going to get stuck again. This was you know this was the time that we knew that we were going to build something to not be stuck. But again, like all of like 99.999% of all creative endeavors, you're going to get stuck. You're going to get stuck in small ways, you're going to get stuck in big ways. And y- we have continually gotten stuck. I'm just addicted to these shiny new bright ideas. And that very, very long circuitous story is how we ended up where we are with Recipe Club today, with season 4 of Recipe Club. Um, we recorded at the beginning of this year of 2025, the first few months of the year, and it was the first time we'd ever tried to record Recipe Club sort of in batch episodes. We tried to do a bunch of them at once, and we had just finished a full year of making a show for Netflix called Dinner Time Live, which started as a 6 episode order in like January and ended up lasting the entire year. We did 37 episodes of this show, and took over our lives for all of 2024, and culminated with Dave had to leave the country, and I had to host our last episode of the year by myself. And it was like a tremendous honor and a success. And I loved Dinner Time Live. And let me just admit to this. I love being on TV. I love hosting podcasts. I like being, you know, recognized for, what I do. I like um all of the trappings that come with being, quote unquote on camera talent. And, can it be a distraction? Sure. Um I think one of the things that we have been having a difficult time right now is how much of a distraction, your ego can be, um relative to what you want to accomplish. And one thing I'm grappling with is, and I think really everybody has to try to grapple with at some point, because it is whether or not your ego and what you want to achieve are mutually exclusive, or if they're the same thing, right? What are you really chasing? And I don't, do I aspire? Have I aspired in the past to be a on camera person? Sure. Is that my number one priority today? I can pretty confidently tell you no. My number one priority today is putting food on the table for my kids, and just sort of um, finding some security and some level of freedom to live our personal lives with intention. That's more important to me than any of the trappings of, extremely modest fame. Um, so anyway, we started recording Recipe Club this season. Dave was who is on the podcast with me, has been on the podcast with me for all of the first 3 seasons, was absent for a large chunk of the season because he was recovering from shoulder surgery and from just the rigors and trauma of making Dinner Time Live, honestly. So he was gone for a few episodes. um we had it in our minds that this season of Recipe Club we were going to turn it into a game show. the first season we recorded during the pandemic. It's like this really difficult magic to recapture. And I mean, I don't mean the magic of the pandemic. What I mean is the magic of, man, all of these people. It resonated with so many people because we were all in the same exact place. And Dave and Priya and Rachel and myself, we all had the time and space and willingness to cook, three different versions of the same dish every single week and then get together to talk about it. And the second season we tried to correct how much work that was and make it more of a exploration of other people's recipes, a little bit more gamified. um, we used, you know like I said, recipes that people were sending in. um, but then everybody, and myself included, felt like, oh, we're just cooking one recipe now. We're missing the competition. So then we corrected again for the third season and said, okay, let's bring the competition back. We're going to introduce this literal physical wheel that will spin and will provide us all with constraints on how we can cook the dishes we've been assigned. You have to do it in a microwave. You got to do it in 20 minutes. You got to do it super fancy. You have to do it super cheap. Um, which was all fun and interesting, but it was like a little bit more of a gimmick, I think, or it just started to get a little bit out of the kind of useful realm and became a little bit more stunty. And so then season four, we said, let's make it like a pure competition here. And we moved into a studio. We vowed that we'd only record in person because we could now. We weren't trapped by the um Zoom world. And we would have all these sort of different scenarios for people to sort of try to solve. It's a potluck. It's the first time you're cooking for your in-laws. It's Valentine's Day. You're cooking for yourself. What are the different possible solutions? And we were trying to answer, which I still think is essential to what Recipe Club is, which is like to provide some sort of inspiration for other people to motivate you or help you out of your kind of cooking block of like, what the hell should I make tonight? But it wasn't really rooted in reality, right? It was twice a week I was recording episodes where I'd be like, okay, who am I talking to today? And okay, like, let's pretend we're going to a potluck, let's pretend we're going to a tailgate, and let's just, hypothetically do this. Let's do a cooking for one episode where only, one of the people on our panel was really living alone. So Dave came back from his surgery and he was in this happy hour episode of the show. And at this point I had really fallen in love with this idea that like we were going to power through these 29 episodes of recordings and then be able to um, clear the dockets to move on to the next thing again. And Dave had missed, a chunk of this time where we were just sort of like the train was moving. It was going full steam. And again, I sort of fell in love with this idea that like, oh man, we're finally doing it. It's like Recipe Club is not such a struggle anymore. We're just like banging out episodes. We're way ahead, and the show's gonna be done, and I can think about something else. And Dave came in, and we did this episode, and I couldn't really see, but I knew that he was, um, I guess, unhappy, but it's not really about his happiness. He was a little shocked that we were working this way, that we were just trying to kind of like power through. And it sort of manifested during the show itself, where, I was like, okay, and then we move on to the next segment. We move on to the next segment. Like, that's the rhythm of the show. And he wouldn't want to move on, right? He'd want to stay in a moment, stay talking about something, which, is typically his thing anyway. But we started talking about a recipe from the chef Ferran Adria. And I try to sort of give a top level summary of what I thought this recipe was really about. And Dave said something to the effect of like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And kind of just like stopped me, shut me down. I was offended by this. Um, and I didn't really understand where he was coming from, like why he would, you know, push me like that in the middle of show, just be like in front of people, be like, "You're an idiot." uh, but what he wanted to do was be like, nobody knows who Ferran Adria is. You're not giving any context for this. Like, why are we just powering through this moment where we could be digging into this story? And after the show, we had like a really, really difficult conversation. And I think there's an episode of the Dave Chang show, we recorded soon after, where we allude to this really, really difficult, but I think ultimately um productive conversation. But essentially Dave was like questioning why the show was like this, why it felt like a mess, why I wasn't stopping to explain to the listener who Ferran Adria was, um, and why it just generally seemed like I didn't care what the audience was walking away with, or I wasn't, I, you know, didn't wasn't giving it everything, and you know, of course, I didn't think that was true or fair, but I'm trying really, really hard in life, especially my creative life, where I'm typically somebody who has a really, really hard time taking notes, um, as are most of us, I think. Trying super hard to look past the initial instinct to be self-defensive. Even if I think somebody is wrong, there's no practical use for defensiveness. You know, I try to dig in and see what the truth is to what they're saying, and um, what I can take from the criticism that is true, even if it's painful. And I look back at the season and I was like, okay, there were a few times where I raised the flag. I was like, guys, we're not. This schedule is not allowing us to make the show better episode over episode. We're not taking the time to see a fully edited episode, examine what's going right and what's going wrong, and then improving it for the next recording. We're just recording them all and hoping that they're all good if we're on the same track. And you know, the team sort of agreed with me, but we just kept going. And I tried to sit us all down and search for ways of improving the show. I asked for feedback on what I was doing. I think everybody was just so in it that we didn't stop. And ultimately, like, I don't want to dwell on this moment, because like it doesn't matter, because I didn't stop us. And a problem for me is, I want to be the face of this thing, and I didn't want to own this thing. And it's up to me to stop the process, to stop the train and say, like, I don't want to do this. I'm being serious. I want to stop and improve episode over episode. Um, but we didn't, and we recorded 20 of those episodes, and we stopped after that one. And I'll be honest with you, like, Dave Chang and I have been struggling a lot right now. Um, and it's hard when you're friends with somebody, and like Dave and I are friends. And what I mean by that is, like, if we didn't work together, I think we would hang out. I think, we would make each other laugh. We would be there for each other when it mattered. We'd push each other. I know this because when in the rare occasions when we don't have to, we're somewhere where it's not about work. Like, we have a great relationship, but at the moment we're in like a tough position, a tough place. And I don't know if other people have this same. It's not. Dave is good at this. He's I mean this in a good way. He's good at compartmentalizing friendship from being your coworker. And we don't hang out, uh, because I think that gets in the way of trying to push for the best work. But like, um, this has been a hugely difficult few years at Major Domo Media too, because all my life I've worked with friends, and you know, I've had friends work for us at Major Domo Media. None of them have ended well, and it's been difficult. It's been beyond difficult, because, part of me is like, I just want to do cool shit with my friends. But that can't be if you want to succeed. And what I mean by succeed is like what most of us set out for creatively, which is like for other people to watch and to pay money for what you do with your friends. Like it can't always just be a friendship first thing. Anyway, this is totally off track, and I know this video is getting very long. But my point is, I'm trying to listen to what Dave has been saying to me genuinely, and there, there have been moments where like other people have been around when we've been having arguments or heated discussions in the office, and afterwards people will be like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. That sucks." And without fail, I'll be like, "Yeah, I'm super upset, but like." He's not wrong. He's not wrong about these things he's saying, and I'll give you some examples of the things that that he has been saying to me. And listen, I understand Dave Chang. With apologies to all of his friends and family, like I understand him better than any other person on this planet. And even for me, it takes me a few days to sort of wrap my head around the things that he's saying and to like really, really internalize them, like to take them out of the context with which he says them and apply them to myself and figure out like, oh, okay, I am doing that. And some of the things he's saying are like, uh, everything you want is on the other side of fear. I'm pretty sure he stole this quote. But I think about what I'm really afraid of. And I think that there are a few things I'm afraid of. I have FOMO, like I said. I'm afraid of missing out on an idea, an opportunity, a chance to do something else. I'm afraid of going it alone, of not having a Dave or a David, with their name on the door to sort of insulate me. I'm afraid of being too old to be making content, to be fighting with, the kids who are better looking and have more free time. Um, you know, I have a um I have this sheet on my computer, this spreadsheet of sort of like well, let me back up. Because the other thing Dave has been saying to me, he's like he's telling me, I have all the answers. And that when I really focus on one thing, I can walk on water. But my problem is that like I'm only willing to work on the things that really excite me. And I don't want to work on the stuff that doesn't. And he's right. I mean, that sounds obvious, but this sheet on my computer is like all of the things I want to work on. And most of them I've already committed to in some small way or fashion and given some attention to. And, it's again, it's a roulette table and I'm putting a chip on all 36 spaces. Um, and I'll tell you right now some of the things that are on my list, like just to give you a sense of like how deep this FOMO goes. Um, there's Recipe Club, there's the Dave Chang Show, there's Dinner Time Live, there are 4 cookbooks I'm supposed to be writing. There's this idea I have for a travel show where I tag along on people's family vacations. There is a dating competition show that I've been working on, a romance novel, a YA novel about a high school band, a documentary series that I've been tinkering around with Will Poulter, a video game, a competition show adapted from a video game, a scripted show about a Chinese guy on a boat in the 19th century, another scripted show about a critic who hates food but keeps feeling his way upward, a a live cooking show that I make with Bobby Moynihan once a month. And this is all to say nothing for like the things I want to accomplish with my house and my marriage and my kids. And I'm putting $1 on every single space on this board except for 0 and 00, which means I'm going to lose. So Dave keeps on telling me, like, you have to give it everything, and he's right. Like, Dave's achieved great success at Momofuku by living this singular vision and eating and breathing and dying with this thing. And he's telling me I'm being selfish by not giving it all to the team or to our partners. Like, Bill Simmons has, I should stop and just say, like, Bill Simmons has been nothing but, like, ridiculously supportive. I cannot say enough for him in the position he is in to sort of encourage and give us the opportunity to make Recipe Club, and the resources to do so. And Dave is saying, I'm sort of like betraying that trust and betraying the team by not focusing entirely. And I think it's what took me a few days to understand is it's like he's telling me I'm holding back and phoning it in. And I bristle against this. I bristle against it because I work so hard. I work so hard. And he's, by his own admission, like, it's not about how hard you work. It's just like you're holding back on things. And I think what I'm really doing is just a slightly different thing from what he is saying, and maybe the same thing, which is just like I'm compartmentalizing ideas. I'm compartmentalizing what Recipe Club is, what these other shows I want to do are, what all of these things I want. I'm like, well, that's for that, and that's for that, and that's for that. And, I'm going to give this part of me to here. And it's just something I've done my entire life, which is, here's who I am to my cook friends. Here's who I am to my writer friends. Here's who I am to my parents. Here's who I am to Dave. Here's who I am to, my wife, whatever. And, I think I have to stop compartmentalizing and just sort of let Recipe Club be the product of, like, in that same way that season 1 was just a product of where we really were and, like, the thing that I really, really cared about at that moment, which was, like, feeding my family. That's what, you know, short of starting another pandemic, just kidding. It's just being relatable by being honest. Your life is not exactly like mine. Nobody's lives are the same. So, like, trying to chase trying to chase some kind of relatability because it's like you and I are the same is less important than just like what's relatable is vulnerability, insecurity, triumph, success, struggle. I want to be relatable by sharing that as opposed to trying to find these false points of, like, hey, we all go to potlucks, right? 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 And so I want to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of Recipe Club, but just what I want to do generally after we stop recording this never-ending video here. Um, here's what I do love about Recipe Club. Here's what I love about it. I love the sense of discovery. I love of finding something where I didn't think I would find it. It's literally the recipes that we would cook, and I'd be like, I've never heard of this. I can't believe this. This sounds so weird. And then just having your hair blown back by the deliciousness or the convenience or the smartness of a recipe. The show really genuinely, like I said, helped me feed my family, gave me ideas, given me dishes that we now still eat, years after I first made them on the show. I love being excited to share something with you. Like, I love that feeling of not being able to wait until the episode comes out so that people can hear it. Even if, I sit there, I remember putting out episodes just being like, God, I can't wait until, my friends hear this and they text me about this and they're going to think it's so cool. And as I've been sort of doing all this soul searching about Recipe Club, I went back and I listened to an old episode of the show we did on Pillsbury tube dough. We were exploring all the uses for Pillsbury tube dough. And I couldn't convince Rachel Kong and Dave Chang that the method I had found online for steaming Pillsbury dough as like out of the box steamed bun dough was the coolest thing in the world. I could not convince them. They were just like, "No, that's fine. It was cool, but like, oh, this roast beef crescent ring is better." And I listened to this episode and I could hear it in my voice. I was getting so pissed. I was getting so upset at these two people, my friends, for just like, I was like, I cannot believe you will not listen to me. And I flashed back to that time and place and I was like, oh man, I remember at that moment just like hating this show. Like I was like, I hate making this show. These people like just will not listen to me. With like 3, 4, 5 years distance now, like I look back at that moment and I think it's not about it's not about like just hot takes and people pissing each other off and crossfire and fighting each other and debating. It's that anger I felt was because like I loved this thing so much and I just wanted to share this thing and I wanted other people to buy into this thing and I was angry that I couldn't get them to do it. And I don't think I have felt that anger for a little while now about anything I'm doing because I've just, man, the state of media today, what a stupid way to start a sentence. The state of media today is no different than it's ever been. The powers that be, the people with the money have always been trying to find a way to like sort of keep you hooked. And it's just the tools to do so are more powerful now. And nobody's interested. Nobody is it's not beneficial to anybody to make media that tries to change people because the more you change people, the harder it is to keep them watching you. Or if their tastes change or their lives change, they're going to move on to something else and it becomes less predictable. Um, but God, like right now, where my eyes and my ears and my heart just feel completely at the mercy of my phone and what the algorithms have identified about me and my tastes, like it's inescapable. Like I would love for my discover tab on my Instagram to not just be all of the weird stuff it is now. I just want to be somebody else, but like I keep looking at it and goddamn, like Recipe Club and just creative work could do something else. It could just like, what I love about Recipe Club? I love the cooking. As much as I complain about having to cook 3 different turkeys in 1 week, man, like it was so nice that like my job and was to do something, and I want Recipe Club to give other people that too, to give other people an excuse, a reason, a motivation to. No matter how good you are at cooking or bad you are at cooking or whatever, like to be just to do it just to like hopefully meet you where you are at the very very specific place you are and that's it. That's what Recipe Club season 1 was. Like we were all in this place of just like struggling and missing things and longing and um I know it sounds so hokey, but cooking was some form of solace, some form of connection, some form of I don't know, man, just like getting off your ass and doing something. And that's why we called it a club. And that's I lose sight of that. This game show version of the show, as much as there were moments that I love, like it wasn't a club anymore, right? It was just I think about it in terms of like a sports team, and the fan base of a sports team and like a football club, let's call it like a British football club where the uniting nugget is the club itself and our interest in our shared interest in being in this thing, in this case, cooking and eating, and we all come from different backgrounds, and we're all in different life positions, and we're all committed to it at different levels. But we're part of this club together, and we like to see how other people express their fandom for this club, um, and that's what you know Recipe Club is or has been, and I hope will be. That's the kind of thing I want to do creatively, and I don't want to get stuck. I don't want to move on from Recipe Club right now. So like what the hell is the show going to be? I don't know. Like I can tell you from like I don't want to make the first season again. I don't want one of my favorite podcasts in the world is a podcast called The Adventure Zone, and I think like those guys, the McElroy brothers, have struggled since the very first season of that show because all anybody ever wants is them to make that first season again. And I think that I imagine they've probably gone through a lot of the same sort of feelings as I have, as we have over the last few seasons of our show, of just how do you recreate a moment in time, and like what was the true kernel of like emotional truth at the center of that thing that like brought people together. Um, in that case, it was like a dad and his three sons like learning a game together, really, and telling a story together and for the first time. And so, I'll tell you, I think that Recipe Club moving forward is I can't say anything definitively because literally I've not talked to Dave about this. I've not talked to Noel about this. I've not talked to anybody else about this. But I think I can't get out of my head that like this can't be a sit in a studio and pretend show. Um, I'm 43 years old. I just turned 43. I have two kids and I work a lot. And the way I cook at home, truthfully, is like I ask my wife to defrost something at like 2 p.m., whatever she can find. I get home, I walk in the door, and I try to figure out what it is. And I try to like put something on the table that my kids will eat that has some kind of a starchy thing on the side. And, like that's my truth. And nothing like that wasn't on Recipe Club at all. None of that was in this season of the show. None of that has been on the show for a few seasons. And uh this past weekend I just had my birthday party, and my family right now is on like a very tight budget, and so I didn't feel, my wife wanted to have a party at her parents' house where we were staying for our friends, and I was like, I don't want to spend the money on ordering food. I'm just going to cook it all. And it was like there was some great stuff, there was some disastrous stuff. There's a lot of things I can tell you about trying to cook for 30 people, specifically cooking for like an outdoor, gathering, and cooking for a bunch of vegetarians, and like none of that was in the show. I would love to talk about how like I made two versions of cold beef and beer because I had read about it in a Sherlock Holmes book. And I called up my friend who has a ranch and talked to him about the beef, and like that's a the week before Rachel Kong turned 40, and she asked me to help her roast a whole pig, which I had never done before. And I ordered a pig from a friend who sent it to her house in an Uber. And I screwed it up, man. I did a really, really bad job, and I dishonored this animal. Like it was edible, but it was just a huge disappointment to me. I would love to talk about it. I'd love to talk about those occasions where like you feel like you need to pull out the stops, and you reach outside of your comfort zone, and how do you do it right? Like I would love to talk to Josh Skeens about how you would actually roast a pig properly. I'd love to talk about people and like what it means to like celebrate like a momentous party, especially somebody like Rachel who like typically doesn't do big like outlandish things like roast a whole pig or whatever. And I'd also like to just sort of speak up for like as bad as a job as I think I did. I'm proud of sort of like reaching outside of my comfort zone and trying something. Like these are stories I want to be able to talk to, not just about for my own life, but with other people. I want to embed with other people's real cooking lives. Like I want to go to your house. I want to, if I could did this season all over again and we did the cooking for one episode, I would have gone and spent time with my partner, Chris, who was the one person who was really living this life of cooking for themselves, and I would love to have cooked the dish with him. And we none of this made the episode. Like, he called me, he was like, "Oh, I'm really worried about making this curry dish," and I talked him through it. Like, I should have just done that with him in person. I should have talked to him about, when he first started living alone after his divorce, and how, I spent many nights on his futon with him, just like eating trail mix. Like, that's what the show has to be, I think. And or just whatever that truth is. Like, I've worked on so many versions of this show now in the past few weeks. Like, I've written up 4 different game shows. I wrote up an entire version where we would all just cook different super important seminal recipes from Julia Child and Ina Garten and that kid on TikTok who makes the cucumber salads. Like, I've written up so many ideas, and they're all sort of missing this core nugget. And I'm just thinking about all these moments I could have explored more deeply this season. And I apologize to you because uh if you're listening to all of this, and or you listened to the podcast before, like, I could have given you something more. I could have, like, given you the other compartments of my life that I didn't include with this show. And here's all I know is I'm 43, and I just cannot get stuck anymore. And we have 9 more episodes in this season. I don't know exactly what the show is going to look like, but it's not going to be fakey, fakey, fake. I don't know if you'll be into it. I'm going to give this everything. And if it gets stuck, it's not going to be because I moved on to something else. If it gets stuck, it's going to be because it was too good for you all and you all missed it. And that's the state of the union for Recipe Club.